You ever catch yourself scrolling through your feed at 2 a.m., binge watching some anime arc for the third time, feeling something you can't quite name? Like there's this weight pressing on your chest, but you keep hitting next episode anyway? Yeah, that's not just entertainment anymore. That's something else. Something darker. See, we tell ourselves we're just fans, right? Just vibing with good storytelling. But there's this gnarly truth nobody wants to admit out loud. These shows aren't just showing you stories. They're rewiring how you see yourself, how you process pain, how you deal with being stuck. And the wildest part? You don't even notice it happening. You think you're just watching characters suffer and overcome, but really you're training your brain to accept suffering as aesthetic, as normal, as beautiful even. There's this invisible thing happening between you and that screen, something that feels intimate and safe, but it's actually hollowing you out from the inside. You feel it, don't you? That strange comfort in watching broken characters stay broken? That's not random. That's the trap. And you've been living in it so long, you forgot what it feels like to be free from it. If this hits you like it hit me, if you felt that same pull staring at the screen at 2 a.m., do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button. Keep coming back here because we're peeling back these illusions together. And drop a like if you've ever felt that hollow comfort in watching pain. It tells the algorithm you're ready to see the truth behind the screen. There's this guy, mid-20s, let's call him Marcus. Lives somewhere in the Bay Area, works some tech-adjacent gig that pays decent but doesn't quite cover the lifestyle he thought he'd have by now. Normal dude. Goes to the gym sometimes, grabs boba with friends, scrolls Twitter during lunch breaks. But here's where it gets real. Marcus has this thing he does every single night without fail. He comes home, exhausted from pretending to care about sprint planning meetings and Slack messages, drops his bag by the door, doesn't even change out of his work clothes half the time, and just collapses on his bed with his phone. And he queues up whatever anime he's currently running through. Could be a rewatch, could be something new everyone's hyping up. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the second those opening notes hit, the second he sees that animation kick in, something in his chest unlocks. Like he can finally breathe. He tells himself it's just decompressing. Just chilling out after a long day. Everyone needs their thing, right? Some people hit the bar, some people game, he watches anime. No big deal. It's harmless. It's fun. It's his escape from the grind, from the weight of existing in a world that demands too much and gives back too little. But if you looked closer, if you really paid attention to Marcus during those watching sessions, you'd notice something off. The way his eyes go dead in certain scenes. The way he replays specific moments over and over, moments where characters break down, where they admit they're not strong enough, where they accept their pain as permanent. He doesn't skip those parts. He leans into them, rewinds them, watches them like they're scripture. And afterwards he just sits there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling this strange mix of emptiness and satisfaction. Like he just purged something, but also like he just made it worse. Marcus wasn't always like this. Back in high school, anime was just something cool he got into because his friends were watching it. They'd talk about power scaling, debate who'd win in fights, laugh at the ridiculous fan service. It was light. It was social. But somewhere along the line, after graduation, after everyone scattered to different colleges and different cities, after the group chat went quiet and the Discord server died, Marcus kept watching. Alone now. And the shows he gravitated toward changed. No more Shonen tournament arcs. No more goofy slice-of-life comedies. Now it was the heavy stuff. The psychological dramas. The shows about characters who couldn't escape their circumstances. Shows about people trapped by fate, by society, by their own minds. Shows where suffering wasn't just a plot point, it was the whole aesthetic. The whole vibe. And Marcus ate it up. He'd finish a series and immediately hit Reddit to read analyses, to dive into forums where people dissected every frame, every line of dialogue, every symbolic choice. He'd stay up until 3 a.m. reading essays about the philosophy of despair in some niche seinen show. He'd watch video essays breaking down the psychology of why certain characters resonated so hard. And every single time he'd find pieces of himself in those characters. The protagonist who works a dead-end job and feels invisible? That's him. The side character who smiles through the pain because showing weakness feels like failure? That's him too. The villain who gave up on changing and just decided to burn it all down? Yeah, he gets that energy on bad days. But here's where it gets twisted, here's where the trap really shows itself. Marcus started using these characters as permission slips. Permission to stay stuck. Permission to accept that maybe life's just supposed to feel like this. Because if these beautifully animated, perfectly written characters can't escape their suffering, if their pain is presented as deep and meaningful and even beautiful, then maybe his pain is too. Maybe his stagnation isn't failure. Maybe it's just his arc. Maybe he's the protagonist of a psychological drama, and this grinding, hollow feeling is just part of the narrative. The shows taught him a language for his discomfort. Gave him frameworks to understand why he feels disconnected, anxious, purposeless. But they didn't give him tools to change it. They just made it prettier. More acceptable. They turned his depression into aesthetic. His loneliness into atmosphere. His lack of direction into a compelling character flaw. And the wildest part is that Marcus knows this on some level. He's not stupid. He's self-aware enough to recognize the pattern. Sometimes he'll joke about it with the few friends he still talks to. Yeah man, I'm basically just living in my own depressing anime arc right now, haha. And they'll laugh because it sounds absurd, because it's easier to laugh than to admit something's actually wrong. But alone at night, when he's 3 episodes deep and feeling that familiar ache in his chest, he's not laughing. He's sinking. He's letting these fictional narratives validate his real-life paralysis. The guilt hits him sometimes. Usually on Sunday nights. That creeping anxiety that he just wasted another weekend, that he's 26 now and still hasn't figured out what he's doing with his life, that everyone else seems to be moving forward while he's just treading water. And what does he do with that guilt? He watches another episode. Finds another character going through the same thing. And suddenly the guilt transforms into something else. Into kinship. Into proof that he's not alone in feeling this way. Except he is alone. Because these characters aren't real. They're not going through anything. They're just drawings and voice acting and carefully crafted psychological manipulation designed to make you feel something. But Marcus treats them like therapy. Like friends. Like mirrors that reflect back a version of himself that's tragic and deep instead of just stuck. Just scared. Just avoiding the actual work of changing. The shows never tell you that part. They never show you the character who breaks the cycle by logging off, by touching grass, by doing the unglamorous work of building a real life. Because that's not dramatic. That's not compelling television. So instead they give you characters who suffer beautifully, who make pain look profound, who convince you that your struggle is romantic rather than something you could actually address. And Marcus? Marcus keeps watching. Keeps finding new shows that scratch that same itch. Keeps joining online communities where everyone speaks the shared language of animated suffering. Where everyone understands references to specific scenes of specific breakdowns. Where everyone's profile picture is some character mid-crisis. Feels like belonging. Feels like culture. But really, it's just a bunch of people validating each other's stagnation. Telling each other that it's okay to feel this way. That it's deep to feel this way. That they're sensitive souls in a harsh world, not just people who've outsourced their emotional processing to Japanese animation studios. The dependency grew so gradually that Marcus never noticed it happening. Never noticed how his real emotions started feeling less real than the ones he experienced watching fiction. Never noticed how he stopped trying to fix his actual problems and started just finding characters with similar problems to watch instead. Never noticed how his identity became more about what he consumed than what he created. How he became less of a person and more of a fan. Less of someone living and more of someone watching. Here's what Marcus didn't realize, what none of us realize until it's too late. The anime wasn't reflecting his pain. It was teaching him how to perform it. See, there's this insidious thing that happens when you consume enough psychological drama, enough beautifully animated suffering. Your brain starts to learn the script. Starts to recognize the patterns. And then, without you even noticing, you start living according to those patterns. You start casting yourself as the tortured protagonist. You start framing your mundane struggles as if they're tragic character development. You start waiting for some external force to give your pain meaning, to make your stagnation part of some larger narrative arc. But that's not how real life works. Real life doesn't have a writer making sure your suffering leads somewhere. Real life doesn't guarantee that your pain will be beautiful or meaningful or worth it in the end. But the shows convinced you otherwise. They taught you that suffering is depth. That struggle is identity. That if you're not perpetually wounded, you're not interesting. And now you're hooked on that framework like it's oxygen. Marcus had this moment about 3 months ago where he almost broke through. He was watching this particular show, some dark fantasy thing where the main character keeps making the same mistakes over and over, trapped in cycles of self-destruction. And there's this scene where another character calls him out. Tells him that he's addicted to his own misery. That he keeps choosing pain because it's familiar, because it's easier than the terrifying work of actually changing. And Marcus felt it. That uncomfortable recognition. That mirror held up too close. He actually paused the episode. Sat there in silence for like 10 minutes, just breathing, feeling something shift in his chest. For a second he could see it clearly, the pattern, the trap, the way he'd been using these stories as permission to stay stuck. He could see how he'd weaponized fiction against his own growth. How he'd let animated characters become his emotional authority figures. How he'd traded real healing for parasocial relationships with drawings. For a second he was right there on the edge of understanding. Right there on the edge of breaking free. But then you know what he did? He hit play again. Watched the main character ignore the advice and fall right back into the same destructive pattern. And Marcus felt relieved. Because if the character doesn't change, if the character stays trapped, then Marcus doesn't have to change either. The show just gave him permission to sink back into the comfortable darkness. And that's when you realize what these shows actually are. They're not warnings. They're not cautionary tales. They're instruction manuals for how to romanticize your own decay. They're teaching you that stagnation is aesthetic. That pain is personality. That being broken is the same thing as being deep. And the studios know this. The writers know this. They know exactly what they're doing when they craft these characters, when they linger on those shots of empty eyes and trembling hands, when they score those breakdown scenes with haunting music that makes despair feel like art. They're not trying to help you process your emotions. They're trying to make you dependent on their version of emotional processing. They're selling you a substitute for actual growth, actual change, actual life. And it works because it feels so real in the moment. When you're watching that character spiral, when you're reading those internal monologues about worthlessness and fear and shame, your brain doesn't distinguish between fiction and reality. The emotions you feel are real. The tears are real. The catharsis feels real. But it's borrowed catharsis. It's second-hand healing. You're processing emotions through someone else's scripted journey, and the problem is that scripted journeys always loop back. They have to, for the next season, for the next arc, for the next episode. Characters can't actually heal and move on because then there's no show. So they stay broken. They stay stuck. They stay suffering. And so do you. Because you've tied your emotional rhythm to theirs. You've synced your heartbeat to animated tragedy. And now you can't tell the difference between feeling something and actually changing something. Marcus knows this now. Somewhere deep down, past all the rationalizations and justifications, he knows. He knows that every night he spends watching another tortured character is another night he's not building an actual life. He knows that every forum discussion about fictional psychology is time he could have spent on real therapy. He knows that every parasocial attachment to an animated character is a real human connection he's avoiding. He knows all of this, but knowing doesn't stop him. Because the trap isn't about information. It's not about awareness. The trap is that the shows made suffering feel like home. They made pain feel like identity. They made stagnation feel like storyline. And now Marcus is terrified that without that framework, without that aesthetic, he'll just be nothing. Just a regular guy with regular problems and no dramatic narrative to make them matter. Just someone who wasted his 20s watching cartoons instead of living. And that's too ugly to face. That's too raw. So he keeps watching. Keeps sinking. Keeps letting these shows drain his time, his energy, his potential, his actual living, breathing existence. And they don't even have to force him. He volunteers. He subscribes. He hits autoplay. He chooses the beautiful lie over the ugly truth every single time. Drop a comment right now, just one word that describes what you felt watching your last anime episode. Just one word. Don't think about it. You need to see this pattern written out. You need to witness it becoming real in the comments below. And then keep watching. Because the next part is where everything clicks. The next part is where you'll finally understand why you can't stop, even when you know you should. Let me tell you what's actually being stolen from you, and it's not just time. Time is the obvious answer, the easy one, the one you already beat yourself up about. Yeah, Marcus has wasted hundreds, maybe thousands of hours watching shows. But that's not the real theft. The real theft is way more sinister, way more permanent. These shows are stealing your future by convincing you that your present is already written. They're stealing your agency by framing your life as a narrative you're experiencing rather than a reality you're creating. They're stealing your identity by replacing who you actually are with this curated collection of characters you relate to. You're not Marcus anymore. You're the guy who relates to that character from that show. You're the person whose personality is just a mixtape of animated references. You're a walking mood board of fictional aesthetics. And the scariest part? You don't even remember who you were before you became this. Before you learned to process every emotion through the lens of anime psychology. Before you started describing your real life using terminology from shows. Before you replaced genuine self-reflection with character analysis. The dependency runs deeper than you think. It's not just about entertainment. It's not just about filling empty hours. These shows have become your emotional infrastructure. They're how you understand sadness. How you contextualize loneliness. How you make sense of anxiety. When something bad happens in Marcus's real life, when he gets passed over for a promotion, when a situationship falls apart, when he looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the tired eyes staring back, his first instinct isn't to sit with those feelings, isn't to talk to a friend or write in a journal or go for a walk. His first instinct is to find a show where a character goes through something similar, to outsource his emotional processing to fiction, to let some writer in Japan tell him how he's supposed to feel about his own life. And that's the trap fully sprung. That's when you realize you've lost the ability to feel things without a reference point, without a character to map it onto, without a scene to compare it to. Your emotions aren't even yours anymore. They're licensed content. They're borrowed frameworks. You're experiencing your own life as if it's a reaction video to someone else's art. And it gets worse because these shows don't just steal your emotional autonomy, they steal your ambition. Think about it. Think about what happens after you finish a really heavy, really well-made psychological anime. You feel that weight, that satisfaction, that sense of having experienced something profound. And then what? You go about your day feeling like you accomplished something. Like you grew. Like you learned. But you didn't. You didn't do anything. You sat there and watched drawings move. You absorbed someone else's crafted message. You felt emotions that were designed, manufactured, focus tested to hit exactly the right neurons. That's not growth. That's consumption disguised as development. But your brain releases the same chemicals. Gives you the same reward. So now you're getting the neurological payoff of personal growth without actually doing any of the work of personal growth. And why would you do the hard work when you can get the same high from just watching another season? Why would you go to therapy when you can watch a character go to therapy? Why would you confront your actual trauma when you can watch animated trauma that's prettier and more poetic and comes with a sick soundtrack? Marcus used to have dreams, back before the shows became his entire personality. He wanted to write. Had notebooks full of ideas, characters, worlds he wanted to build. He'd stay up late sketching out plots, imagining dialogue, feeling that electric creative energy that makes you feel alive. But somewhere along the way he stopped creating and just started consuming. Told himself he was studying the craft, learning from the masters, doing research by watching all these brilliantly written shows. But really he was just replacing his own creative voice with theirs. His notebooks gathered dust. His ideas stayed trapped in his head, never making it to the page because they didn't feel as polished as the shows he watched. How could his rough, unfinished human stories compete with these professionally animated, perfectly paced, multi-million-dollar productions? So he stopped trying. Convinced himself he was a fan, a critic, an appreciator of the art form, when really he was just someone who gave up. Someone who let these shows colonize the space where his own creativity used to live. And now when he thinks about writing, all that comes out are characters that feel like copies. Dialogue that sounds like dub translations. Plots that are just remixes of shows he's seen. His creative voice got overwritten. His imagination got formatted and replaced with someone else's operating system. The loneliness is the worst part and nobody talks about it. Marcus has online friends, sure. People he's never met but talks to daily. People who get his references, who've seen the same shows, who speak the same language of animated psychology. But are they friends? Really? Or are they just people who validate his consumption habits? People who enable his dependency? He can talk to them about plot theories and character development for hours, but when something real happens, when he feels genuinely sad or scared or lost, he doesn't reach out to them. Because the friendship is based on shared media, not shared humanity. It's a connection built on what you watch, not who you are. And deep down, Marcus knows that if he stopped watching anime tomorrow, those friendships would evaporate. Because there's nothing underneath. No real foundation. Just a bunch of isolated people using the same shows to avoid dealing with their own isolation. Trading references like currency. Performing fandom like it's personality. And calling it community when really it's just parallel loneliness. Just a bunch of people sitting in separate rooms, watching the same thing, feeling alone together. And the shows keep feeding you this idea that isolation is deep. That being misunderstood is profound. That not fitting in makes you special. They romanticize the outsider, the loner, the person who can't connect with others. They make it look cool. Make it look like a superpower instead of a wound. And Marcus bought it. Convinced himself that his inability to form real relationships was actually him being authentic. Actually him refusing to be fake like everyone else. Actually him being too complex for shallow connections. But that's bullshit. That's just fear dressed up in aesthetic clothing. That's just avoidance wearing the mask of depth. He's not choosing isolation because he's profound. He's choosing isolation because it's easier than the vulnerability of real human connection. Easier than the risk of being seen and rejected. Easier than showing up as his actual messy self instead of the curated version he presents online. The shows taught him that loneliness is beautiful, that suffering alone is noble, that needing people is weakness. And now he's trapped in that mindset, watching characters go through the same cycle, never learning that the show isn't reality. That real growth happens in connection, not isolation. That healing requires other people, not just more episodes. Your life is being spent on borrowed emotions. Your potential is being drained by fictional narratives. Your identity is being shaped by corporate products designed to keep you watching, keep you engaged, keep you coming back for the next season and the next and the next. And the genius of it is that it doesn't feel like exploitation. It feels like choice. It feels like passion. It feels like you're part of something, like you're appreciating art, like you're a sophisticated consumer of complex storytelling. But strip away the aesthetic, strip away the animation quality, strip away the philosophical pretension, and what are you left with? You're left with someone who's afraid to live their actual life. Someone who's replaced experience with observation. Someone who's chosen to be an audience member instead of a participant. And the shows will never tell you that. They'll never break the fourth wall and say, hey, maybe turn this off and go do something real. Because they need you. Their entire business model depends on you staying dependent. On you believing that what you're doing is meaningful. On you confusing consumption with growth, fanhood with identity, watching with living. Marcus is 26. He's got maybe 60, 70 years left if he's lucky. And every single day he makes the same choice. He comes home. He queues up another show. He sinks into that familiar darkness. He feels those borrowed emotions. He processes his life through someone else's lens. And another day disappears. Another chance to build something real, to connect with someone real, to become someone real, just gone. Traded for the temporary comfort of animated tragedy. For the easy catharsis of fictional breakdown. For the safe distance of observing pain instead of confronting his own. And one day he'll be 40, then 50, then 60. And he'll look back at all this time, all these years, and realize they weren't years at all. They were just a long string of episodes. A binge session that lasted decades. A life spent watching other lives instead of living his own. And by then it'll be too late to get it back. Too late to undo the dependency. Too late to recover the person he could have been if he just logged off and stepped outside and done literally anything else. But he won't think about that now. Right now he's got a new show queued up. And this one's supposed to be really good. So here's where we are. Marcus is still watching. Right now probably. While you're reading this, while you're processing this, he's 3 episodes into something new. Something that promised to be different but feels exactly the same. Another tortured protagonist. Another cycle of suffering. Another beautifully animated excuse to stay exactly where he is. And the thing is, he knows. He's read the comments. He's seen the analysis. He's had that uncomfortable recognition hit him multiple times. But knowing doesn't break the pattern. Understanding the trap doesn't spring you free. Because the trap isn't intellectual. It's not something you logic your way out of. The trap is comfort. The trap is that these shows feel like home in a way that reality never has. The trap is that fictional pain is manageable in a way that real pain isn't. You can pause it, skip it, rewatch it until it loses its edge. You can control animated suffering in a way you can't control your own. And that illusion of control, that safe distance from real emotion, that's what keeps you coming back. Not the stories. Not the animation. Not the depth. Just the safety of feeling something without having to change anything. Marcus will probably watch tonight. After work, after the commute, after another day of pretending his life has direction. He'll scroll through his list looking for something that matches his mood, which is always some variation of hollow. And he'll find it. He always does. Because there's an endless supply. New seasons dropping every quarter. New studios making the same shows with different aesthetics. The content never stops. The pipeline never runs dry. And neither does the dependency. Every show he finishes just creates space for the next one. Every emotional arc he completes just primes him for another hit. It's infinite. It's bottomless. It's designed that way. The industry figured out decades ago that you're not watching for resolution. You're watching for the ritual. For the routine. For the predictable emotional journey that asks nothing of you except your time and your attention and your money and your life. And you give it willingly. You subscribe. You stream. You recommend. You defend it online when someone suggests maybe you're spending too much time with cartoons. You build your identity around it so completely that criticism of the medium feels like criticism of you. And maybe it is. Maybe you are what you watch at this point. Maybe there's nothing left underneath the references and the reactions and the consumption. But here's the part that really keeps you up at night when you let yourself think about it. The part that hits different when you're alone and the episode ended and the credits are rolling and you haven't moved in 3 hours. It's not just that you're wasting time. It's that you're training yourself. Training your brain to seek emotional resolution through fiction. Training your nervous system to feel satisfied without actually doing anything. Training your identity to form around consumption rather than creation. You're teaching yourself, night after night, that passive observation is equivalent to active living. That understanding characters is the same as understanding yourself. That watching someone overcome struggle is the same as overcoming struggle. And your brain, your poor desperate brain that just wants to survive and feel okay, accepts this trade. Releases the dopamine. Marks it as meaningful. Files it away as experience even though nothing actually happened. You didn't live anything. You didn't risk anything. You didn't grow anything. You just sat there. And your brain rewarded you anyway. And now you're addicted to the reward without the effort. Hooked on the feeling without the work. Dependent on borrowed narratives to give your existence shape. The shows will never save you. That's the thing Marcus hasn't accepted yet. They'll never give him the catharsis he's actually looking for. They'll never heal what's actually broken. Because what's broken isn't some plot point that can be resolved in a season finale. What's broken is the belief that life can be lived secondhand. That you can experience existence through a screen and call it a life. That you can trade your one shot at being alive for the comfort of watching other people's stories, even if those people are drawings, even if those stories are manufactured, even if the whole thing is just a product designed to extract your time and attention and sell it to advertisers. The shows can't fix that, can't address that, because they're the problem. They're the drug pretending to be the cure. They're the poison dressed up as medicine. And Marcus keeps taking his dose, every single night, wondering why he never feels better. Why the emptiness never fills. Why the shows that used to make him feel something now just make him feel numb. Why he needs darker content, heavier themes, more extreme psychological torture just to feel that flicker of connection he used to get from something simple. And it's not just Marcus. It's all of us who fell into this. All of us who convinced ourselves that our consumption habits were personality traits. That our watch lists were identities. That our ability to analyze fiction was the same as our ability to understand reality. We're all sitting in our separate rooms, watching the same cycles of animated suffering, feeling less alone because we have each other in the comments, in the forums, in the Discord servers. But we're not less alone. We're just alone together. Just mutually enabling each other's avoidance of actual life. Trading references like their intimacy. Sharing screenshots like their vulnerability. Building entire relationships around what we watch instead of who we are. And calling it community. Calling it culture. Calling it depth. When really it's just a bunch of people who are scared to live their actual lives using fiction as a shield. As an excuse. As a place to hide that feels like a place to belong. The next episode is queued up. For Marcus, for you, for all of us caught in this. It's sitting there in your watch history, your recommendations, your bookmarks. Waiting. Patient. Knowing you'll come back. Knowing you always do. Because where else are you gonna go? Back to reality? Back to the messy, uncertain, unscripted chaos of actual living? Back to the version of yourself that doesn't have a soundtrack and doesn't have perfect timing and doesn't fit neatly into a genre? That's too scary. Too real. Too raw. So you'll hit play again. You'll sink back into that comfortable darkness. You'll let another fictional character guide you through emotions you should be processing yourself. You'll waste another night, another week, another year. And the shows will still be there. Always be there. Feeding on your avoidance. Growing fat on your wasted potential. Profiting from your fear of being alive. And you'll thank them for it. Leave positive reviews. Tell your friends to watch. Defend the artistry. Never once admitting that maybe, just maybe, you're not a fan. You're just someone who's scared. Just someone who chose the pretty lie over the ugly truth. Just someone who's running out of time while pretending that watching the clock counts as living. Marcus has another show starting tonight. Something about a character who can't escape their past. Something that promises to be profound. And he'll watch it. All of it. In one sitting probably. And tomorrow he'll wake up tired and hollow and wondering why nothing ever changes. And he won't connect the dots. Won't see the pattern. Won't realize that the shows aren't showing him the way out. They're the walls of the prison. And he'll do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until one day he's 60, sitting in the same spot, watching the same themes, having never built anything real. Never connected with anything human. Never lived anything that couldn't be paused or skipped or rewatched. Just a ghost who thought he was a person. Just a viewer who forgot he was supposed to be a participant. Just another casualty of the most beautiful trap ever designed. The next video drops in 48 hours. It's about the other invisible cage most people don't even know they're in. Another pattern that's draining your life while making you feel like you're doing something meaningful. If you're not subscribed, you won't see it when it drops. And you'll go right back to the cycle, wondering why you feel stuck, never seeing the mechanism that's keeping you there. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because the next trap is quieter than this one. More socially acceptable. Hiding in plain sight. And if you don't catch it early, it'll take everything while you're busy thinking you're making progress. Don't let that happen. The clock's already ticking. And unlike these shows, your life doesn't come with a second season.